I always believed that if someone wanted me gone, they'd come from the shadows. I never imagined they'd be standing in my own kitchen, smiling, holding a champagne glass. The night of our housewarming was supposed to be the happiest night of my life. My husband was beaming. Our friends filled every room with laughter. Even my mother-in-law, who had spent years making me feel like I would never truly belong in her family, arrived carrying flowers and wearing the warmest smile I'd ever seen on her face. I should have known that was my first warning. Minutes before the toast, I walked into the kitchen and caught her doing something she never realized I'd seen. She quickly slipped a tiny silver vial back into her purse after pouring its contents into one single champagne glass. I froze. I told myself there had to be an innocent explanation. Medicine, sweetener, anything. Then I noticed something that made my blood run cold. She quietly tied a pale silver ribbon around the stem of that exact glass. She wasn't marking every drink. She was marking one. Mine. When she walked across the room, looked me in the eye, and handed me that champagne flute with a smile, every instinct I had screamed not to drink it. But refusing would have caused a scene in front of everyone. So I smiled back. And then, by nothing more than a ridiculous accident, I set my glass down for just a few seconds. When I picked it up again, I grabbed the wrong one. Seconds later, my mother-in-law raised what she believed was her own champagne, toasted our new home, and drank from the glass that had been prepared for me. She collapsed before anyone even realized something was wrong. As everyone rushed to save her life, I looked across the room and saw my husband. He wasn't looking at his mother. He wasn't calling for help. He was staring at me, like I'd just ruined a plan that was never supposed to fail. That was the moment I realized something far more terrifying than poison had entered my life. Because whoever wanted me dead wasn't a stranger. They were already part of my family. And what I uncovered over the following weeks would expose decades of lies, greed, betrayal, and a secret so dangerous that someone was willing to kill to keep it buried. Before we go deeper, I have a question for you. Have you ever had a gut feeling that something wasn't right and ignored it because you didn't want to seem paranoid? Tell me in the comments. And if you enjoy emotional family mysteries with shocking twists, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss another story. My name is Eliana Prescott, and until that night, I thought I had everything I'd ever wanted. Our new home sat just outside Franklin, Tennessee, tucked away on a quiet road lined with mature oak trees and white fences. It wasn't a mansion, but after years of saving, it felt like a dream come true. My husband, Caleb Prescott, had fallen in love with it the moment we walked through the front door. "It's peaceful," he'd said. "It feels like the kind of place where we can grow old together." I believed him. Looking back now, I sometimes wonder if he believed it too. The housewarming was my idea. I wanted to thank the people who had helped us settle into the neighborhood and finally bring both sides of our families together. I'd spent 3 days preparing. The dining table was decorated with fresh eucalyptus and white candles. Soft jazz played through hidden speakers. The smell of roasted chicken and homemade bread filled every room. For the first time in months, I felt genuinely happy. Guests began arriving shortly after 6. Our new neighbors, a few close friends, Caleb's business partner, his aunt and uncle. Then, 20 minutes later, his mother arrived. Judith Prescott. Judith had perfected the art of appearing kind while making you feel unwelcome. She never raised her voice. She never insulted me directly. Instead, she wrapped criticism inside compliments. "Your decorating style is so modern. It's much bolder than I would have chosen." Or, "The chicken smells wonderful. Caleb always preferred richer recipes, but I'm sure he'll get used to this." Anyone listening would think she was being polite. Only I understood the message hidden beneath every sentence. Still, I smiled. I had promised myself that tonight would be different. No arguments. No tension, just family. To my surprise, Judith seemed unusually pleasant. She hugged me when she arrived, complimented the house, even thanked me for inviting her. I caught Caleb watching us with visible relief. "See?" he whispered as he passed me in the hallway. "I told you she'd come around." I wanted to believe him. I truly did. About an hour into the evening, I realized we were running low on sparkling water. I slipped into the kitchen to grab more from the pantry. That's when I noticed Judith. She was alone. She stood near the island where I'd arranged the champagne bottles for the toast. She didn't hear me enter. From inside her handbag, she removed a tiny amber-colored bottle about the size of a bottle of eye drops. She unscrewed the cap, tilted it over one champagne flute. A clear liquid disappeared into the drink. Then she calmly returned the bottle to her purse. I froze. My first thought wasn't poison, it was medication. Maybe vitamins. Maybe liquid medicine. There had to be an explanation. Before I could say anything, Judith looked up. Our eyes met. For a fraction of a second, surprise flashed across her face. Then she smiled. "Oh, Ilianel, you startled me." "So sorry," I said, forcing a smile. "I was just grabbing more water." She stepped away from the counter without hesitation. I was making sure everyone's glasses were ready for the toast. I looked at the tray. There were 8 champagne flutes. One stood slightly apart from the others. I couldn't explain why, but that tiny detail unsettled me. Judith picked up the tray. "Would you mind helping me carry these?" I hesitated, then nodded. Together, we walked into the living room. Everyone gathered near the fireplace. Caleb thanked our guests for celebrating with us. Laughter filled the room. Phones came out to take pictures. Someone suggested a toast. Judith volunteered to hand everyone a glass. She moved slowly around the room. One by one, she passed them out. When she reached me, she paused. "This one is yours." She smiled warmly. Too warmly. I accepted the glass. Something inside me tightened. Maybe it was because of what I'd seen in the kitchen. Maybe it was because she seemed unusually interested in making sure I received that specific flute. I told myself I was imagining things. Then our elderly neighbor, Margaret Ellis, accidentally brushed against my elbow while adjusting her cane. "Oh dear," she exclaimed. A splash of champagne spilled onto my hand and the front of my dress. "I'm so sorry." "It's okay," I said quickly. I laughed it off, set my champagne glass on the buffet table beside another untouched glass, and reached for a napkin. Margaret insisted on helping me clean the spill. The distraction lasted no more than 15 seconds. When I turned back, 2 champagne flutes were sitting side by side on the buffet. I genuinely couldn't remember which one had been mine. Feeling slightly embarrassed over making everyone wait, I picked up the glass closest to me. No one seemed to notice, or so I thought. Across the room, I caught Judith watching me. Her eyes narrowed ever so slightly. Not angry, confused. She glanced from the glass in my hand to the one still sitting on the buffet. Then, almost imperceptibly, her expression changed. For the first time all evening, she looked frightened. Before I could make sense of it, Caleb raised his own glass. To new beginnings. Everyone echoed the toast. We all drank, including Judith. She had apparently picked up the only champagne flute still resting on the buffet. At first, nothing happened. Conversation resumed. People laughed. Someone complimented the dessert. Then, less than a minute later, I heard a sharp gasp. Judith clutched her throat. Her champagne glass slipped from her fingers, shattered on the hardwood floor, and she staggered backward. "Mom!" Caleb shouted. She tried to speak. No words came out. Within seconds, she collapsed. The room erupted into panic. Several guests rushed toward her. Someone called emergency services. I stood frozen, staring at the broken glass scattered across my floor. The room exploded into chaos. Another guest knelt beside Judith, trying to keep her awake. Caleb dropped to his knees next to his mother, his face drained of color. "Mom, stay with me." Judith's lips trembled as if she were trying to say something, but no sound came out. Her breathing became shallow, and within seconds her eyes rolled back. I couldn't move. I kept staring at the broken champagne glass. Not because Judith had collapsed, because I knew exactly which glass she had just drunk from. The one that should have been in my hand. The paramedics arrived in less than 10 minutes. One of them immediately began assessing Judith, while another asked everyone to step back. "Did anyone else drink the champagne?" he asked. Every guest raised a hand. "Is anyone else feeling sick?" Silence. The paramedic frowned. He looked at the broken glass on the floor, then at the unopened champagne bottle still sitting on the sideboard. "Did she pour her own drink?" "No," I answered. "I poured all the champagne before everyone gathered," I explained. Then I left the tray on the kitchen island while I checked on dinner. So the glasses were already filled before the guests came together? Yes. Did anyone go near them after that? I hesitated. I saw Judith in the kitchen. Every conversation in the room stopped. Caleb slowly turned toward me. "What do you mean?" I swallowed. I walked into the kitchen a few minutes before the toast. She was standing alone beside the tray. The lead paramedic looked up. "Doing what?" I saw her pour something from a small amber bottle into one champagne glass. A heavy silence settled over the room. Caleb stared at me in disbelief. "Eliana, I didn't know what it was," I said quickly. "I thought maybe it was medicine. I didn't want to accuse your mother of something without knowing." The paramedic immediately turned to his partner. "We need that broken glass and every remaining champagne flute preserved." One of the officers who had arrived with emergency services carefully photographed the scene before collecting the broken pieces of Judith's glass, the remaining champagne flutes, and the unopened bottle. Nothing was thrown away. Everything became evidence. Judith was rushed to the hospital. Caleb left with her in the ambulance. Before the doors closed, he looked back at me. There was fear in his eyes. Not suspicion, just fear. "I'll call you." Then they were gone. The guests left quietly over the next hour. Several hugged me. Others apologized as if the entire evening had somehow become their fault. By 10 o'clock, the house was empty. I stood alone in my kitchen. The same kitchen where I'd been so excited to welcome everyone just a few hours earlier. Now every counter had yellow evidence markers sitting on it. The silence felt unbearable. I replayed the moment over and over. Judith pouring something into one glass. Handing that exact glass to me. Me spilling champagne. Setting my glass down. Picking up the wrong one. Judith later drinking the only remaining glass. The sequence fit perfectly. There was no missing piece. If I hadn't spilled my drink, I would have swallowed whatever she had placed inside it. At nearly midnight, Caleb finally called. "How is she?" I asked immediately. He sounded exhausted. "They stabilized her." I closed my eyes in relief. Thank God. They've already started running toxicology tests. My stomach tightened. "Toxicology?" "Yes." Another long silence. Then he spoke quietly. "The doctors think she was poisoned." The words landed like ice. "So, it wasn't a medical emergency?" "No. They're certain." I leaned against the kitchen counter to steady myself. "Caleb, there's something I have to tell you." "I know. I saw your mom put something into one champagne glass." "I already told the paramedics." He didn't answer. Instead, he asked one question. "Are you absolutely sure?" I wish I wasn't. The silence that followed felt endless. Finally, he whispered, "I don't understand." "Neither do I." The next morning, Detectives Naomi Fletcher and Grant Holloway arrived at my home. They introduced themselves politely before asking if we could sit at the dining table. Naomi opened a notebook. "We'd like you to describe everything from the moment you entered the kitchen." I repeated every detail carefully. This time I didn't leave anything out. The amber bottle, the single champagne glass, Judith handing that specific drink to me, the accidental spill, the switch. The detectives listened without interrupting. When I finished, Grant asked, "When you set your glass down, did anyone touch either of the two glasses?" I closed my eyes, forcing myself to replay every second. Margaret had been helping wipe champagne from my dress. Several guests were laughing nearby. No one approached the buffet. No. I'm certain. So Judith unknowingly picked up the only remaining glass? Yes. Naomi nodded slowly. That means your account is internally consistent. I blinked. What does that mean? It means there was no opportunity for anyone else to switch the glasses after you placed yours on the buffet. My pulse quickened. So, if your statement is accurate, she paused. Then Judith accidentally drank the very champagne she intended you to drink. Before leaving, Naomi asked one final question. "Mrs. Prescott, has Judith ever threatened you?" "No." "Has she ever suggested Caleb should have married someone else?" I gave a humorless laugh. "More times than I can count. But she's never threatened my life." Naomi closed her notebook. People don't always begin with violence. Sometimes resentment grows quietly for years. After they left, I decided to clean the kitchen. Not because I wanted to, because I needed something to keep my hands busy. As I wiped down the island, something caught my eye beneath one of the cabinets. A tiny amber-colored plastic cap. About the size of a pencil eraser. My heart skipped. I picked it up carefully using a paper towel. It looked exactly like the cap that would fit a small medicine bottle. The same kind of bottle I'd seen in Judith's hand. It must have fallen off when she hurriedly put the bottle back into her purse. I immediately placed it inside a clean zip-top bag without touching it directly. I wasn't about to contaminate potential evidence. Just then, my phone rang. The caller ID showed Caleb. I answered immediately. "How's your mother?" He didn't respond to my question. Instead, he spoke so quietly I almost couldn't hear him. "Eliana, the toxicology report just came back." I gripped the phone tighter. "What did it say?" He took a shaky breath. "The substance found in Mom's bloodstream wasn't in the champagne bottle." I frowned. "What?" "It was only in one glass." My heart stopped. He continued. "The doctors say whoever did this poisoned a single serving, and in that instant, every last hope that this had been a terrible accident disappeared." I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Judith handing me that champagne flute with a smile. Then I saw her collapse, the same smile replaced by terror. One question refused to leave my mind. If Judith poisoned my drink, why did she look horrified after I picked up the wrong glass? If she knew exactly what she'd done, shouldn't she have realized the danger the moment I set my glass down? Unless she thought she still knew which glass was mine. I replayed every second in my head. When I set my champagne down, I hadn't paid attention to where I'd placed it. Neither had Judith. The two glasses had ended up side by side. She must have assumed I picked up the one she'd handed me. Only after I lifted the other glass did she realize something was wrong. By then, it was too late. At 9 that morning, Detective Naomi Fletcher called. "Mrs. Prescott?" "Yes. We've obtained a search warrant for Judith Prescott's home." My pulse quickened. "Did you find anything?" "Not yet. But we'd like you to come to the station this afternoon." "For what?" "There are a few things we'd like you to identify." The police station felt colder than I remembered from television. Naomi led me into an interview room where several evidence bags had been arranged on the table. Inside one was a small amber bottle. My stomach tightened. It looked exactly like the one I'd seen in Judith's hand. "Do you recognize it?" Naomi asked. "I can't be 100% certain. But it looks the same." Naomi nodded. "We found it inside a cosmetic pouch in Judith's bedroom." My heart sank. So, she really did have it. Grant Holloway entered carrying another folder. We also recovered fingerprints. Whose? Judith's. I looked down at the table. Everything seemed to point in one direction. Yet something still didn't feel right. Naomi must have noticed the hesitation on my face. "You don't seem convinced." "I'm not." She raised an eyebrow. "I watched Judith poison one glass. I know what I saw. But I struggled to explain the feeling. It doesn't make sense." "What doesn't?" "If she truly wanted me dead, why stay at the party? Why drink any champagne at all?" Naomi folded her arms. "Go on." She had every opportunity to leave before the toast. Instead, she stayed. She celebrated. She laughed. She had no reason to believe she'd end up drinking that glass. Grant looked thoughtful. "Meaning?" "Meaning she never expected to be in danger herself." Naomi nodded slowly. "That's a reasonable observation. But it doesn't eliminate her as a suspect." "I know. It just feels like we're missing something." When I returned home, Caleb was waiting in the driveway. He looked exhausted. "I've been trying to reach you." My phone was on silent. He nodded. "Can we talk?" I wasn't sure I wanted to, but I also knew avoiding him wouldn't make any of this disappear. We sat on the back porch overlooking the yard. For several minutes, neither of us spoke. Finally, Caleb broke the silence. "The doctors say Mom's condition is improving." "I'm glad." He looked at me. "So am I." Another long pause. Then he quietly asked, "Do you think she wanted to kill you?" The question hurt more than I expected. "I don't know. I know what I saw, but I don't understand why." He stared out across the yard. "Neither do I. I grew up with a difficult mother. Controlling? Judgmental? But violent?" He shook his head. "Never." I believed him. At least, I believed that he believed it. As we talked, my phone vibrated. It was Detective Naomi. "Mrs. Prescott, we've just received another lab report." "What is it?" "The poison wasn't something purchased over the counter." "So?" "It requires specialized access." I frowned. "What kind of access?" the type normally available only through licensed laboratories or industrial chemical suppliers. I felt a chill. So this wasn't impulsive. No. Whoever planned this prepared it well in advance. After the call ended, I noticed Caleb staring at me. "What happened?" I told him. His expression changed immediately, almost as though something had just clicked. "I need to show you something." He disappeared inside the house. A minute later, he returned carrying an old leather-bound planner. "I found this while unpacking boxes from my father's office." "You've never shown me this." I didn't think it mattered. He handed it to me. Most of the pages contained ordinary appointments. Then one entry caught my attention. Written in neat blue ink were 3 words. "Meet with Roland." Beside it was a phone number. "No last name?" I asked. Caleb shook his head. "Just Roland." I flipped several pages ahead. The same name appeared repeatedly over several months. Who was he? I don't know. My father never talked about him. The final entry mentioning Roland had been circled twice. Beneath it, someone had written one sentence. "Trust no one until this is finished." My heartbeat quickened. What was finished? I have no idea. That evening, I couldn't stop thinking about the planner. Something about it felt important. Not because of the name, because of the timing. The entries stopped abruptly just weeks before Caleb's father died. It was as though whatever investigation he had been conducting had suddenly ended, or been stopped. At exactly 8:17 p.m., my doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I opened the door, no one was there. Only a small padded envelope lying on the welcome mat. No return address. No postage. Someone had delivered it by hand. Inside was a single flash drive. Nothing else. I carried it straight to my office and plugged it into my laptop. Only one video file appeared. The timestamp showed it had been recorded on the morning of our housewarming. I clicked play. The image came into focus. It was grainy security camera footage. The angle overlooked my own kitchen. My blood ran cold. Someone had been recording inside my house. The footage showed me leaving the kitchen after arranging the champagne. A few moments later, Judith walked in. Exactly as I'd remembered. She removed the amber bottle from her purse. She leaned over one champagne glass. Then, I leaned closer to the screen. Before she could pour anything into the drink, another person entered the kitchen. The camera didn't capture their face, only their arm. They handed Judith something. She exchanged the bottle she was holding for the new one. Then poured the contents into the champagne. Judith hadn't brought the poison into my house. Someone else had handed it to her. The video ended before I could see who it was. I stared at the frozen screen, barely breathing. Judith had administered the poison, but she hadn't acted alone. Somewhere, there was another person, and they had been inside my house that night. I watched the video again, then a fourth time. Each replay left me with the same frustrating answer. The person who entered my kitchen had deliberately stayed outside the camera's view. Only their right arm appeared, a dark sleeve. A wristwatch with a silver band, nothing else. But one detail stood out. The person wasn't surprised to see Judith. They walked directly to her. No hesitation, no conversation. They simply handed her the small amber bottle, took the one she was already holding, slipped it into a coat pocket, and left the kitchen. Judith then poured the contents of the replacement bottle into my champagne glass. The exchange took less than 5 seconds. It looked rehearsed. My heart pounded. Whoever this person was, they weren't improvising. They had planned every second. I immediately called Detective Naomi Fletcher. 25 minutes later, she and Grant Holloway were sitting in my living room watching the footage. Neither detective spoke until the video ended. Grant paused the screen. There. He zoomed in on the wristwatch. "It's distinctive." Naomi nodded. "We'll have the forensic lab enhance the image." I looked at them. So Judith wasn't acting alone. "No," Naomi answered without hesitation. "Whoever supplied that bottle is now just as important as the person who poured it." I swallowed hard. Could Judith have believed it wasn't poison? Naomi didn't answer immediately. "It's possible. But we don't have evidence of that yet." That was the first time since the investigation began that someone had acknowledged what had been bothering me from the start. Judith's hatred toward me was real. But murder? It still didn't feel like her. The detectives took the flash drive as evidence. Before leaving, Naomi turned to me. "One question. Where did you get this?" I found it on my front porch. No note? No. No fingerprints that you noticed? I handled only the envelope. She nodded. Someone wants this investigation to move in a specific direction. What do you mean? They could have gone to the police. Instead, they gave it to you. The thought unsettled me. Someone was watching, not just the investigation. The following morning, I visited the hospital. Judith had finally regained consciousness. I wasn't sure why I went. Maybe I wanted answers. Maybe I wanted closure. When I entered her room, she looked weaker than I'd ever seen her. The confident woman who had spent years criticizing me was gone. She looked frightened. When she saw me, tears filled her eyes. Ileana? Her voice was barely audible. I stood near the doorway. You almost died. She closed her eyes. I know. Neither of us spoke for several seconds. Finally, I asked the question I had carried since the night of the party. Why? She looked genuinely confused. What do you mean? I saw you pour something into my champagne. She immediately began crying. I thought. She stopped. You thought what? I thought it would only make you sick. Every muscle in my body went rigid. What? She covered her face with trembling hands. I never wanted you dead. I stared at her. Then what did you think was in the bottle? Her breathing became uneven. I was told it was a harmless sedative. Who told you? She hesitated, then whispered, I can't. You have to. I can't. Judith. She looked at me with absolute terror. They said if I ever spoke their name, they would destroy my family. The fear in her eyes wasn't fake. It was the fear of someone who had spent weeks believing she had killed another human being. I quietly pulled a chair closer. Listen to me. I need the truth. She nodded weakly. They told me you married Caleb because of his inheritance. They said you'd leave him once everything was in your name. I stared at her in disbelief. I've never even asked Caleb about his inheritance. I know that now, she sobbed. But they convinced me. They said if you became violently ill during the party, Caleb would finally see your true colors when you blamed me. I frowned. That doesn't even make sense. I know. I was foolish. No. You were manipulated. She looked at me. You believe me? I believe someone used your resentment. Tears streamed down her face. I've made so many mistakes. But I swear to you, I never knew that bottle contained poison. For the first time, I believed her. As I left the hospital, Detective Naomi called. Where are you? I just spoke with Judith. Good. Because we have something. What is it? The forensic lab enhanced the security footage. Did they identify the person? No. But they identified the watch. I frowned. A watch? Yes. It wasn't sold in stores. It was a limited commemorative watch presented only to senior executives at one company. What company? Naomi took a slow breath. The Prescott Group. I stopped walking. My husband's company. Yes. Only 12 executives ever received that watch. Which meant the mystery had suddenly become much smaller. The person who handed Judith the poison wasn't a stranger. It was someone from inside Caleb's family business. That evening, Caleb and I spread the company's executive photographs across the dining table. There were 12 senior executives, 8 men, 4 women. Every one of them had received the same commemorative watch. We compared each official photograph with the enhanced image from the security footage. One by one, we ruled them out. Different build, different sleeve length, different ring. Finally, we reached the last photograph. Neither of us spoke. Caleb slowly lowered the picture onto the table. His face had gone completely pale. No. I looked down. The executive in the photograph was someone we both knew, someone who had attended our housewarming, someone who had hugged Judith before dinner, someone who had stood only a few feet away when she collapsed, and someone who had quietly left the party before the police arrived. Caleb whispered the name before I could. Tessa Cooper. She wasn't just a senior executive. She had been my father-in-law's most trusted financial officer for nearly 20 years. And according to Detective Naomi, she had disappeared from work the very morning Judith woke up. I couldn't stop staring at Tessa's photograph. Her smile looked so ordinary, warm, professional, trustworthy. She had brought us a crystal serving bowl as a housewarming gift. She had complimented my cooking. She had even hugged Judith before dinner. Now Detective Naomi was telling me that Tessa had disappeared without warning. It didn't make sense. Or at least, It didn't until I remembered something. The day after the party, I'd found that padded envelope containing the security footage on my front porch. If Tessa was responsible, why would she send me evidence that implicated Judith? Unless she wanted Judith to take the blame. The following morning, Caleb and I met Naomi and Grant at the police station. Naomi spread several financial documents across the conference table. We've spent the last 48 hours reviewing company records. She pointed to a series of wire transfers. Over the past 7 years, someone has diverted millions of dollars through shell companies. I looked at Caleb. He looked genuinely shocked. I've never seen these accounts before. Naomi nodded. She slid another folder toward us. Every transfer required authorization from the chief financial officer, Tessa. Grant spoke next. Your father discovered the discrepancies shortly before his death. My stomach tightened. So that's why he kept writing about someone he couldn't trust. Exactly. He began gathering evidence. But he died before he could expose the fraud. Caleb looked down. My father died from a heart attack. The medical examiner confirmed that. Naomi nodded. Yes. We're not investigating his death. We're investigating what happened afterward. I thought about Judith, about everything she'd confessed. She said someone convinced her I married Caleb for money. Grant nodded. We believe Tessa spent months manipulating her. Why? Because Judith already disliked you. It made her the perfect person to exploit. Naomi leaned forward. If Judith handed you the poisoned champagne, everyone would naturally assume she acted alone. And Tessa would never appear connected. The plan was horrifying. Simple, calculated, cruel. Later that afternoon, I asked Naomi the question that had been bothering me. Why poison me? I wasn't involved in the company's finances. Naomi smiled faintly. Actually, you were. I was? She opened another folder. We recovered emails from your father-in-law's old records. One message immediately caught my attention. It had been sent just 6 months before he died. The subject line read, Future Audit Recommendations. Naomi handed me a printed copy. Inside, my father-in-law had written that if anything ever happened to him, he hoped Caleb's future wife would encourage stronger financial oversight because she was independent enough to question things others accepted. I looked up in disbelief. He wrote this before Caleb and I were even engaged. Caleb smiled sadly. He met you twice. He liked you. He thought you asked the right questions. My eyes filled with tears. I had no idea. Naomi continued. Tessa knew about that email. When you later suggested an independent audit after joining the company as a volunteer for the charity foundation, she realized you were becoming exactly the person your father-in-law predicted. So I became a threat. Yes. That evening, detectives received an anonymous tip. Tessa had been seen at an isolated cabin near an old recreational lake about an hour outside Franklin. Naomi immediately assembled a team. You're not coming, she told me. I understand. I truly did. This wasn't my job. It was theirs. The police surrounded the cabin just after sunset. Caleb and I waited anxiously at the station. Every minute felt like an hour. Then Naomi called. We found Tessa. Is she under arrest? There was a pause. No. My heart sank. She left about 30 minutes before we arrived. What did she leave behind? Naomi's voice became serious. She left a letter. A letter? It's addressed to you. I read it inside the interview room. The handwriting was elegant, steady, almost calm. Eliana, by now you've probably convinced yourself that you've uncovered the truth. You haven't. Judith was useful, nothing more. She believed every lie because she wanted to believe them. You, however, were always more difficult. That's why you had to be removed. Not because of money, because you asked questions. Curious people destroy carefully built empires. If you're reading this, then I underestimated you. I don't intend to make that mistake again. There was no signature, but there didn't need to be. Every word sounded like Tessa. Naomi folded the letter. She knows we're closing in. Grant entered the room moments later. We've just traced the vehicle she abandoned. Where? Grant looked directly at Naomi. To the old Prescott vineyard. Caleb slowly stood. My family hasn't owned that property in years. Naomi nodded. Tessa still has access. She reached for her radio. Let's finish this. As officers rushed out of the station, I looked through the window into the dark Tennessee night. For the first time since my housewarming party, I wasn't afraid. I was ready to know the truth, even if it changed everything I thought I knew. The drive to the old Prescott Vineyard took less than 30 minutes. I wasn't supposed to be there. Detective Naomi had told me to stay at the station while her team executed the arrest warrant. I tried. I truly did. But after everything that had happened, I couldn't sit in a waiting room while someone else uncovered the truth that had nearly cost me my life. Caleb looked over at me as we followed the unmarked police vehicles at a distance. "You don't have to do this." "Yes," I said quietly. "I do." The vineyard had been abandoned for years. Rows of overgrown vines stretched across the hills, and the old stone winery stood in silence beneath the fading evening sky. Police surrounded the property before moving in. Minutes later, Naomi's voice came over the radio. "The building is clear." Grant emerged from the winery carrying a flashlight. No sign of Tessa. My heart sank. Had we missed her again? Then another officer shouted from behind the building, "We've got footprints leading to the cellar." Everyone rushed toward the old wine cellar. The heavy wooden door stood slightly open. Naomi drew her service weapon. "Tessa Cooper, this is the police. Come out with your hands visible." No response. She nodded to two officers. They entered first. The rest of us waited outside. Seconds later, I heard a voice echo from below. "She's here." Tessa wasn't hiding. She was sitting calmly at a wooden table in the center of the cellar. A leather briefcase rested beside her. She simply looked up as Naomi entered. I was wondering how long it would take. The officers secured her without resistance. As Naomi read her rights, Tessa looked past everyone, directly at me. "I hoped you would come." Naomi frowned. "You don't need to speak to her." Tessa smiled faintly. "I know. But she deserves the truth." With Naomi's approval, and with officers present the entire time, I stood a few feet away. I looked at the woman who had almost destroyed my life. "Why?" She sighed. "Because your father-in-law ruined everything. He built a company. I built its success. When he decided to restructure the finances, he would have uncovered every account I'd created. So you stole from him. I earned more than he ever appreciated." "You stole?" She smiled bitterly. "If that's what you prefer to call it." I shook my head. "And me? What had I ever done to you?" "You notice things," she answered without hesitation. "The first time you visited the office, you questioned an expense report. You asked why the charity foundation used 3 different accounting firms. It was a casual question. It wasn't casual to me." She leaned back. "I realized you were observant. I couldn't risk another person asking the same questions your father-in-law had asked. So, you convinced Judith I was after Caleb's money." "Yes." "You knew she already disliked me." "It wasn't difficult." My chest tightened. "You used her." "I did." "You let her believe she was giving me something harmless." Tessa looked away for the first time. "She was never supposed to die. Neither was I." "No." Her voice was almost emotionless. "You were." The room fell silent. There was no denial. No excuse. Just the truth. Naomi stepped forward. "One question remains. How did Eliana survive?" Tessa gave a short, humorless laugh. "Bad luck." She looked at me. "When you spilled your champagne, I saw you place your glass on the buffet. I couldn't leave my position without drawing attention. I expected Judith to make sure you picked up the correct one." But she hesitated. "You reached for the other glass. Before anyone could stop you, the toast had already begun." She closed her eyes briefly. "For the first time in years, my perfect plan failed because of 15 seconds of bad timing." That explanation fit every event from the housewarming. There had never been a mysterious third glass. No impossible switch. Just one accidental mistake that changed everything. Detective Naomi opened the leather briefcase. Inside were financial ledgers, encrypted storage drives, forged contracts, and detailed records documenting years of embezzlement. Everything Caleb's father had suspected. Everything Tessa had spent years trying to hide. Grant looked up. "This is enough." Naomi nodded. "It's over." 3 months later, Tessa Cooper pleaded guilty to multiple financial crimes and to orchestrating the attempted murder that had nearly taken my life. Her cooperation confirmed every detail of the investigation. Judith was never charged. The evidence showed she had been manipulated into believing she was participating in a cruel but non-lethal scheme. That didn't erase her responsibility, but it explained it. A few weeks after the case ended, Judith asked if we could meet. We chose a small cafe halfway between our homes. She looked nervous. "I don't expect forgiveness," she said. "I know. I judged you before I knew you. I believed lies because they matched my own prejudice." She looked down at her coffee. "I almost destroyed my son's marriage. And I almost helped destroy your life." I sat quietly for a moment. I can't pretend none of this happened. I wouldn't ask you to. But I also don't want to spend the rest of my life carrying anger. Tears filled her eyes. "I'm so sorry, Eliana." "I know." For the first time since I'd known her, there was no sarcasm, no hidden insult, only regret. It didn't erase the past, but it gave us a chance to build something better than we had before. Caleb and I eventually sold the house where our housewarming had nearly become a tragedy. Some places hold memories that are too painful to keep revisiting. We found a smaller home nearby. No grand celebration this time. No champagne toast. Just the two of us carrying boxes through the front door and quietly promising each other something far more valuable than a perfect party: honesty. Because I learned that trust isn't built by grand gestures. It's built by the small truths people choose to tell every day. And sometimes, the smallest accident can save your life. If Margaret hadn't bumped my arm, if I hadn't set my champagne glass on that buffet, if I'd picked up the original glass instead of the one beside it, this story would never have been told. Every time I think about that night, I'm reminded that life can change in the space of a few seconds. Not because fate always intervenes, but because sometimes the truth survives through the smallest, most ordinary moments. If this story kept you guessing until the very end, thank you for watching. If you enjoy emotional mysteries, family betrayals, and suspenseful stories with realistic twists, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss the next story. Your support means everything, and I'll see you in the next unforgettable tale.